Sea levels are rising. Rainfall is shifting. Ocean currents that have moved in the same direction for thousands of years are slowing down. Scientists say we may be approaching a tipping point that once crossed cannot be uncrossed. Most of the models that predict these things trace back to the same source. One place, one continent, one body of ice so enormous, so ancient, so cosmically important that if we lose it, we lose the stable world we have built every single thing upon. Antarctica, the coldest, the windiest, the driest, home to 70% of world's fresh water locked in ice that has been accumulating for 34 million years. It sits at the bottom of our planet and quietly runs the show, regulating ocean temperature, controlling sea levels, feeding weather systems on every continent, sustaining marine food chains that billions of people depend on. It has no government, no citizens, no vote, no legal standing in any courtroom or treaty negotiation on Earth. And right now, it is melting faster than any point in human history. Scientists have a nickname for the glacier they are most frightened by. They call it the Doomsday Glacier. It's the size of Florida. It's already losing mass, and if it goes, it will take between 3 and 5 meters of sea level rise with it, enough to drown Miami, Mumbai, Shanghai, Amsterdam, Lagos, and hundreds of coastal cities in between. Here's what keeps me awake at night. The international systems we have built to protect Antarctica, the treaties, the diplomatic meetings, the carefully worded protocols were written in 1959, before climate science existed as a field, before anyone imagined this was possible. They are failing, and Antarctica has no way to tell us. My guest today is a part of a movement that wants to change that, fundamentally not with better policy, with a different philosophy. One that says Antarctica is not a resource to be managed. It's a living community with the right to exist, to regenerate, and to have a voice. Her name is Roberta Bosu. She's an innovator, a campaigner, a strategist, a storyteller. She is a European Climate Pact Ambassador for the European Commission and a World Food Forum representative for the FAO. She's worked across the private sector, development and NGOs for 14 years, and she has dedicated part of that work to something called Antarctic Rights. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and I think by the end of it, you will have been too. Hello and welcome to Self Talk Show. I'm your show host Mitali Uhuri, and I'm really glad you're here for this one. This episode is made in collaboration with Podcastathon 2026, a global movement where podcasters around the world each dedicate one episode to an NGO doing work that the world needs to hear about. Thousands of shows. One shared conviction that the airways are too powerful to waste on anything less than what matters. For my Podcastathon episode, I chose Antarctic Rights. And I want to tell you why. Because I think my reason says something about what kind of movement we are in right now. Antarctic Rights is a global NGO campaigning for something unprecedented. Legally recognizing Antarctica, the continent, the ice, the ocean, the extraordinary web of life within it, as an entity with rights. Not a resource to be divided, not a territory to be claimed. A living community with the legal rights to be represented in the decisions that determine its future. I came across this organization while researching for Podcastathon, and I felt something I don't always feel when I research a topic. Urgency. Real, bone-deep urgency. That kind that makes you want to close your laptop and call someone. The kind where you feel like you have been missing something obvious and now suddenly you can't unsee it. I want that feeling for you too. I want you to finish this episode and immediately want to tell someone else what you just heard. Because that kind of ripple, person to person, conversation to conversation is exactly what a cause like this runs on. This is Self-Talk Show produced in collaboration with Podcastathon 2026. I am Mitali Uhuri, and this is one of the most important episodes I have ever made. So let's get into it. Roberta, thank you for being here. It's a huge honor and privilege for me to host you. And I'll be honest, I came into my research for this episode expecting to find an interesting niche advocacy campaign. What I found instead felt like one of the most consequential ideas in contemporary environmental law. How are you not on every front page? Anyways, I'm sure you will be very soon. So, before we begin talking about policy and planetary protection, I'd love to start with you personally. What was your first emotional or intellectual connection to Antarctica that made you feel this continent needed a voice, not just only protection?
Hello, everyone. I'm Roberta Bosu, Global Campaign Lead for Antarctic Rights, and I'm very happy today to be here at the Self Talk Show to talk about Antarctica. It's actually been my obsession, if I must say. So before we begin talk about Antarctic rights, you asked me about me personally. So what was my first emotional or intellectual connection to Antarctica? So it's quite peculiar. So I actually started working on this campaign a couple of years ago. I have a background in diplomacy and international relations, and now I'm transitioned more into campaigning and communications and strategies for communication in sustainability and regeneration. So actually, Antarctica for me at first was just something that I studied in my books of geopolitics. So it was an amazing treaty signed in 1959 during the Cold War. And so it was very interesting from a political point of view, but my image of Antarctica was actually very cliche. So just a block of ice at the bottom of the planet with penguins and some scientific bases. That's it. That was my idea of Antarctica. Then I started learning more about Antarctica, the connections that every one of us has with Antarctica and the Southern Ocean, how we are all part of this big ecosystems, connected ecosystem, that we are all actually part of one planet, one ocean, because also the oceans it's just one, if we think about it. We divide them with different names, but it's just one big ocean. And I'm from Sardinia. It's actually an island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. It's part of Italy. So I really felt that I was being very stupid of just having this image cliche of Antarctica and not really feeling interconnected with Antarctica, because Antarctica is actually managing the global weather, the global currents as well. If the ice sheet of Antarctica melts, the sea will rise of 58 meters. That means that I can say goodbye to half of Sardinia even, or a lot of places and communities all around the world. So it really matters what happened in Antarctica and what happened also somewhere else that is connected to Antarctica. And I really felt stupid, I must say, that I was just I started learning more, really, not only about the place itself, so Antarctica itself, but the communities that live in Antarctica, the krill, the whales, how they migrate, how a very tiny species like the krill is the key of the entire food system of the ocean, because without krill, the fish cannot eat, and then also the whales and also the penguins, and so it's really like a matter of a balance. And I really started thinking that we need to talk more about Antarctica. We need to talk less about countries and nationalism and politics and geopolitics and interests, but think about all of us as a community that is interconnected with all the ecosystems, that we are part of nature, and that we also need to challenge these ideas of places, borders, boundaries that we all have. And that was the shift for me. So I started knowing nothing about Antarctica, or really like two informations that were very cliche. And now I'm a bit obsessed, I must say. No, but it's really, I was shocked also by the beauty of this place. I've never been there. So it's, for me, it's also weird on how intense my feelings are for, I a place and a community of life that I never experienced. But that means that all of us can actually have these connections with places or communities or people or animals, species that we never saw and that probably will never see or experience. And so I mentioned rights of nature, right? So I know that not everyone is familiar with this concept. So maybe let's get back into what rights of nature are, or what is the concept and the idea that ecosystems and nature is not just property or a scenery put there to serve the interests of humans, but they are rights-bearing entities. So they can have right to exist, to regenerate, to evolve. And then humans have duties to respect and defend those rights, to recognize those rights, because we are all part, as I was saying before, of nature, of this system. So this is actually something that is not utopia. I've heard this sentence sometimes. I must say that we are just a bunch of hippies, but it's something that is working. It exists. For example, Ecuador's constitution is recognizing since 2008, the rights of Pachamama. It has it in the constitutions, and courts have enforced the rights of rivers like the Vilcabamba against damaging infrastructure projects. It's something that is working also in New Zealand, where the Whanganui River on the 20th of March, so actually in a bit, is the anniversary, 2017, after more than a century of struggle by the Maori. The New Zealand Parliament adopted the Te Ava Tupua, the Whanganui River Claims Settlement Act. And this law recognized the Whanganui River as a legal person with the rights, powers, duties, and liabilities equivalent to a human legal person. Simply said, the river can go to court. And that's actually what happened also in Ecuador when there was the rocket frog. It's a very tiny frog that you can check also on Google. She's very, very cute. There was in a place where a mining company was mining, indeed. So what happened is that the frog actually was brought to the court and was represented in court as a plaintiff. I think that's the right word, as a plaintiff. So not just an object of regulation, because the law is recognizing nature as an object. Like while humans are subject of law, nature at the moment is an object of regulation. And then the frog actually won. So that was a huge win also for the rights of nature, because the courts in Ecuador use the rights of nature provisions to halt major mining projects, showing that these are enforceable rights with real-world impacts on conservation. So it's not just a symbolic language. It's something that even a tiny frog or a river can decide to sue you in courts because you did something against the rights of the river, of the frog, of the tree, of whatever ecosystem we want to mention. So nature is given standing, finally a voice. And so it changes also the way that we see nature as well, because we see more that we are not above, like us as humans, we are not above nature. It's not an anthropocentric word, but we all have rights and we live in communities as well.
That is so true, Roberta. I feel enlightened already. For those new to the idea, what exactly does rights of nature mean, and how would granting rights to Antarctica change the way we relate to and govern the continent? Considering that more than 200 laws in close to 40 countries now recognize rights of nature, which examples stand out to you as proof that this model can be effective in practice?
So, rights of nature asserts that ecosystems and species have inherent rights to exist, persist, regenerate, and thrive, independent of their usefulness to humans. So it means that all the ecosystems, the rivers, the forests, the mountains, the animals, and other beings can be recognized in law as rights-bearing entities, similar in principle to how human beings or even corporations actually hold legal rights. What does it change? So instead of nature being treated as property that owners can destroy or degrade like we are doing at the moment, rights of nature shifts the status of nature to that of a rights holder whose integrity must be recognized and respected. In this way, laws are shifting. You know that laws at the moment are very anthropocentric. So then, in this way, we recognize nature as a rights-bearing entity. So in this way, laws allow nature via human guardians or the representatives to appear in court as an injured party when the rights of nature are violated. And we are requiring governments to prevent the harm rather than simply regulate permitted levels of damage. That's actually a change of worldview, is a change of perspective, is a change of minds, is a mind shift. That's what I wanted to say, sorry. And in the case of Antarctica at the moment is not sitting even at the conference of party for the climate change, so the international climate conferences. It doesn't have a voice. You don't see the seat of Antarctica at the UN, for example. So what happens is that we are not listening really to Antarctica. No one is representing Antarctica because Antarctica doesn't have an indigenous population. So that means that at the moment, for Antarctica, if we shift into recognizing the rights of Antarctica and the rights of nature, we shift from thinking about how we can use this continent, this place responsibly, to what actually does Antarctica as a living system need in order to thrive. So we always think about everything that happens, even in Antarctica. If I think about fishing, tourism, research infrastructure, whatever, everything needs to be evaluated against Antarctica's own rights, not just our economic, geopolitical interests, like human perspective, you know. It's Antarctica at the center, and rights of nature put nature really at the center. And not like, you know, some people are just like, oh yeah, but then nature will have more rights than us. No, we recognize that we are also part of this ecosystem, that we are interconnected, like I was saying before. And as I said before, there are also examples that are working. For example, in New Zealand, the river that has been recognized as the guardians of the Maori. So that's also something that, the rivers have been recognized as legal persons with guardians that are speaking on their behalf in law and in policies. So those cases, the frog ones, the rivers, but many other, because there are more than 200 laws all over the world right now, these precedents show that when nature is given standing, it changes who can bring cases, how harm is defined, and what remedies are possible as well. And that's exactly the transformation we believe the world, but also Antarctica at this moment needs.
I completely agree with you. Antarctic Rights proposes something radical, recognizing Antarctica as an entity with rights. What gap did you see in traditional conservation models that made you realize a completely new legal and philosophical framework was needed?
Traditional conservation, including in Antarctica, is largely based on managing human impacts while keeping humans at the center. Humans are always at the center in this system, in the law system, but in general, even in the conservation system, it is always at the center. We set limits, we designate protected areas, but the underlying logic is always the same. This is a space we manage and optimize, rather than a being we are in relationship with. So what we saw missing was any recognition that Antarctica has intrinsic value and interests that are independent of us and that Antarctica and the Southern Ocean and the community of life in Antarctica should not be sacrificed whenever political consensus is hard to reach, like it's happening oftenly. In practice, current models are struggling with all the cumulative impacts, the long-term duties, and the kind of moral language people actually use when they talk about places they love. Rights of nature offers a different starting point. Antarctica is not just a zone to be regulated, but is a subject of law whose well-being should constrain what states, industries, people can do. And that's the shift. It's just a legal, philosophical framework, but also a change of how we see ourselves, how we see the role of humans in this world.
Antarctica holds about 60% of Earth's fresh water and influences ocean currents. Can you explain why those facts matter to people living thousands of miles away?
Someone recently told me that Antarctica is like the heart of the planet, and she keeps pumping slowly all the blood into the different vessels around the world. And that's actually what Antarctica does. So we see Antarctica at the bottom of the planet, but quietly, Antarctica is shaping everyday life everywhere else. If you think about the ice sheet of Antarctica holds about the 70% of the world's fresh water, and if large portions of this ice sheet melt, then the sea levels will rise globally of around 58 meters. So imagine, a lot of cities, coastal cities and communities will just disappear. Will threaten low-lying cities, entire nations, the island states, and as I said before, also a lot of fishing communities and coastal communities. The waters of Antarctica are actually driving major ocean currents and are regulating the climate, the fisheries, and the weather patterns all around the world. So I think a lot of times I just say Antarctica is embedded in your drinking water security, your coastal safety, your food systems, and also the stability of the seasons you rely on. I mean, that's quite a lot as well.
Indeed it is. For those of us watching from afar, what invisible crises are unfolding there that most of the world doesn't yet grasp? And more importantly, what irreversible tipping points are scientists quietly concerned we may be approaching?
There are a lot of crises happening at the moment in Antarctica, unfortunately, and they can also seem separate stories. Like, the warming oceans, the struggling penguins, the expanding krill fleets, the ice sheet that is melting, but actually everything is deeply interconnected. So, and it's pulling all the whole ecosystem apart. So the Southern Ocean is warming, the sea ice is vanishing. So that means that the sea level is actually rising as well. It's getting warmer in Antarctica. It's even raining, that it was not raining before. And then the Antarctic krill, that is the foundation of the food web, is losing the vitality, is losing, like the industrial trawlers are actually scooping them from the exact hotspots where penguins and recovering whales need them most to survive. There is extended overfishing at the moment. So if you overfish krill, that is the foundation of the food web of the Southern Ocean, then it means that this will have consequences as well. Like we are just fishing krill to put it on the pet food or in these stupid supplements. Like now there is a huge campaign from Sea Shepherd to avoid, like against krill fishing, but also to avoid some of the brands that are using krill in their supplements, for example, that you as humans don't need at all. And we are actually letting penguins starve or whales starve because krill-dependent penguins, for example, face longer, riskier foraging trips and breeding failures. And then the whales, of course, they are rebuilding from past overhunting, eat the same wall. because there are scarcer, less reliable krill, and there are noisier and busier seas with all these trawlers, industrial trawlers that are huge as well. So overfishing krill, penguin declines, warming ocean as well, warming temperatures. Yeah, I mean, I can keep listing as well. Also, tourism is not really regulated, so there are more and more people that are going to Antarctica. It's getting cheaper as well. There are cruises, people getting married even there. So there are a lot of tipping points and visible and invisible crises happening over there. And just because it's far, far away and it's not newsworthy, that's a quote actually from some of the journalists that we talked to, then is not really visible to people daily as well. Also because, as we said before, not a lot of people know the importance of Antarctica for every one of us and also for the balance of the planet.
You have mentioned that current systems like the Antarctic Treaty struggle to respond to urgent environmental challenges. What are the most critical blind spots within existing treaty governance that people outside policy circles rarely understand? Given that the consensus-based decision-making structure allows even one country to block proposals, can you share an example where this has prevented important environmental protections? And ultimately, who currently has a say in Antarctic's future and who's left out of that conversation?
As regards the Antarctic Treaty System, I also want to acknowledge that we are not against the Antarctic Treaty System. Like a lot of people just put us as a kind of reaction to the Antarctic Treaty System, that we are against the treaty system, but that's not the case. We just want to strengthen the Antarctic Treaty System. The Antarctic Treaty System has preserved peace and enabled extraordinary things, science and cooperation in a era that was actually there was a Cold War, right? So it was an incredible treaty. But now things are changed. So the treaty was signed in 1959 and it was not designed for an era of polycrisis and planetary boundaries. So it centers state parties, so with no formal representations for ecosystems, future generations, or global communities who will bear the consequences. So there are just a few states that are managing something that is actually seen as a resource, so that is Antarctica's voice is not really heard, and also is not all the states are even involved. So it's just a minority of states that are taking decisions for Antarctica. It relies on consensus, which means a single state can delay or even block stronger environmental measures, like we saw, for example, for the marine protected areas. It's a proposal, important proposals for large-scale marine protected areas in the Southern Ocean that stalled for years because just a small number of countries opposed them despite broad scientific support. And then it struggled to deal with cumulative impacts across sectors. So fishing, tourism, research, and potential future activities. So it's also managing something that is just in Antarctica, but the climate crisis is happening everywhere. So if I burn fossil fuels in the UK is something that is also affecting Antarctica, how do we deal with that as well? And the decisions are made primarily by a limited club of treaty parties and associated advisory bodies. The meetings are not even open to anyone, not even to journalists as well, the Antarctic Treaty Consultative meetings. And most of humanity, including coastal indigenous communities on the front lines of sea level rise, has no real say in what happens to the ice that will shape their future shorelines. And most importantly, Antarctica doesn't have a say. And that's also what is concerning us the most.
Right. The Antarctic Declaration proposes that humans have a duty to act in Antarctic's best interests. How did this declaration come into existence, and what key conversations or collaborations helped shape these principles? And if it were adopted globally, how might it redefine environmental law beyond Antarctica?
The Antarctica Declaration grew out of a conversation between the Antarctic Rights Working Group. So the Antarctic Rights Working Group is a group of legal scholars, polar researchers, indigenous thinkers, civil society, artists, environmental lawyers, activists, youth. So a lot of people actually involved. And Antarctic Rights was born out of an idea in 2021. So there was an activist that actually thought, what if Antarctica had the right to speak for itself? And then from there, Antarctic Rights was actually born. So this group of people came together and thought that this could be possible, actually. And then after a couple of years, they met, or a year and a half, actually. They met and then they wrote the Antarctica Declaration. And so it came out just out of a meeting, of a conversation, multiple meetings actually. And all these people felt that the existing frameworks were not capturing our ethical responsibilities to Antarctica, and that Antarctica's voice was not heard. So they asked a simple but radical question. If Antarctica could draft a social contract with humanity, what would it contain? From there, then they started articulating the core principles of the Antarctica Declarations. Antarctica's right to exist, to be wild, to evolve, and our duty to act in Antarctica's best interests. So we're currently working on the declaration. It's in a draft. At the moment, you can see it in our website. And the idea is to collect all the feedback from people everywhere, because we want to this declaration to be as inclusive as possible. We don't know what's is a first. Like, we have examples of rights of nature locally. So, as I said before, there are more than 200 laws all around the world. But this is a first because it's something that is international. There is no indigenous population in Antarctica, so it's a first. That's why we want to hear from everyone. We want to include indigenous cosmology, we want to include art, we want to include also geopolitics, science, environmental law, like the point of view of everyone. And then we are currently working on organizing those different workshops and assigning a declaration event on December 1st, that is Antarctica Day in Cape Town this year. So, if adopted globally, the declaration would do mainly two things. First, it would create a normative benchmark against which all Antarctic activities could be judged. And second, it would serve as a template for extending duties-based rights of nature aligned thinking to other global commons. Think about the high sea, the atmospheres, the outer space, or the Amazon as well, like other biomes can actually, this can be a huge, amazing precedent, actually. So it can become also the future of rights of nature, of environmental law, and also the future of how humanity sees the roles of humans and the relationship with nature.
Wow, this will definitely create a major impact for Antarctica. I must say, I really applaud your work. Hats off to you and the whole team of Antarctic Rights. All right, if Antarctica were legally recognized as an autonomous entity tomorrow, what would change immediately in how humanity interacts with it?
If Antarctica were recognized as an autonomous entity tomorrow, there will be definitely some things that could change immediately. So, for example, any proposed activity will need to pass a new test. So we will need to think more about Antarctica's well-being at first. So we will always need to ask ourselves, is this compatible with Antarctica's rights? is this like following or thinking about the well-being of Antarctica. And that would definitely likely raise the bar for approving new infrastructure, the tourism expansions, or extractive activities like the overfishing that I was mentioning before as well, but no, it's not definitely the only one. And then we would also see the creation of formal guardians or trustees that are mandated to speak on Antarctica's behalf in international fora, with legal standings to challenge harmful decisions, so to take someone to court, for example. This part, I think it will also take time because, as I said, a lot of people need to build and to recognize this relationship with Antarctica. But definitely, I think in the long term, this could reorient investments, research agendas, the geopolitical behavior from how do we secure our interests in Antarctica and how do we make good use and use actually Antarctica as a resource, to how do we fulfill our duties to this place that actually is underpinning planetary stabilities, that has a huge connections with everything, that is balancing everything that is so important for all communities of life. So I think that's something that definitely will take time because, as I said, we're not only, it's not just a law, a declaration, is really aiming to educate people, to also change the mindset of a lot of us that are very much still thinking about humans as first and human as above all the different communities of life and nature in general, and they still see nature as a resource.
Beyond climate change headlines, what hidden threats are emerging? Industrial activity, tourism pressure, fishing, geopolitical interests?
So beyond global warming, there are several pressures that are intensifying. I mentioned something also before. There are potential interest in future mineral exploitations at the moment. So there are some things that are, of course, mining is not allowed, also according to the treaty. But as you know, also the geopolitical tensions, also the threats to the Arctic recently and everything, there is the worry that this can also be a threat or a pressure that is intensifying and will intensify in the future. Tourism, for sure. Visitor numbers and itineraries are actually expanding. They are increasing the disturbance to the wildlife, pollution, biosecurity risks, because there is no cap to tourists at the moment, as I was mentioning before. Even there are people going there, getting married, and it's crazy. Fishing. Overfishing, so there are targeted species like the Antarctic krill. We extensively talked about it before. And then overfishing or poorly managed fishings that is undermining the whole food chain and food web. And geopolitical interests, for sure. So there are some, at the moment, also the geopolitical landscape is quite uncertain as well. And global power dynamics are shifting. So Antarctica is increasingly becoming a stage for soft power, research diplomacy, strategic positioning, and this unfortunately can always overshadow the environmental priorities and definitely the well-being of Antarctica. And that's it.
Goodness me, it almost feels like we are shifting from a phase of protection to a phase of pressure. Earlier, Antarctica was naturally shielded because it was so hard to access. But now, with advancing technology, growing economic and political interests, and even things like people choosing it as a destination for weddings, that barrier doesn't really exist anymore. It's shocking. Your A Voice for Antarctica campaign asks people worldwide to share why Antarctica matters to them. What kind of stories or responses have stood out to you so far? And what does that tell you about how people relate to this place.
Last year, we launched a global campaign, A Voice for Antarctica, that is actually still on our website. So if you want to contribute, please send a contribution. You just go to the website and click into Add Your Voice. And we asked people to join the campaign, like just sharing a picture, a poem, a song, and share why Antarctica matters to them. And yeah, for me it was really, it made me emotional, I must say, because we received a lot of different contributions. We received some drawings from children. There was a very cute penguin as well, but a child actually drew also a krill. And usually, you also have this, I call it the influencers species, like the penguins. Penguins are very popular, but no one cares about krill. So it was also very cute that a kid actually drew a krill. And then a lot of songs. We received also songs, beautiful ones, people writing poems, sending us pictures. And people described Antarctica as a mirror, a sanctuary, or a sacred space. And it was just, people were not really talking about data. They were not, I think almost no one mentioned data or percentage, but they talked about relationships, responsibilities. They talked about beauty. They talked about connection as well. And so these told us that our campaign is actually tapping into a deep intuition, so that talking about Antarctica, recognizing the rights of Antarctica is not only something that is technical, that we need to do it, is a technical task, but is a moral commitment. So to actually have like a connection to this space, a lot of people all over the world are screaming this actually, and they became the voice for Antarctica, and I hope that more and more people will actually add their voice to it as well.
Wow, that's so powerful. It's really interesting how a place so remote can still evoke such strong personal responses from people who have never been even there. You're also building an Antarctic alliance of organizations and individuals. Who has already joined, and what kind of support are you still looking for?
Yeah, that's true. We are actually building the Antarctic Alliance. We are the Antarctica Alliance. We were a working group until 1st of December 2025, so last year, and we are officially since then the Antarctic Alliance. That means there are now more than 80 different organizations all over the world, and more than 300 individuals that joined. So there are NGOs, legal experts, artists, youth groups, scientists, academics, polar experts, students. There is also an NGO that is actually working with kids, for example. So it's is very diverse. Indigenous also organizations, and the point is diversity and connections. I think that's what we are looking for. So we are looking for organizations that are willing to endorse the Antarctica Declaration and help carry it into their own networks. We are also looking for, geographically speaking, for more organizations also in Asia in general, because it's also I think not our strength. We don't have a lot of organizations from that side of the world, and it's a pity. For more indigenous-led organizations and youth-led organizations as well. And especially for this year, as I said, receiving more feedback related to the declaration. So definitely something that is our goal. Because if you think about it also for the constitutions, the declarations that are out there, no one is really reading them, because it's a very much, like the language that they use is very much just technical. And that's what we want to avoid. The Antarctica Declaration has words like beautiful in it. It's something that you can read, you can enjoy, and that's what we want to do. We want to have also the feedback of everyone, so of youth, of indigenous, of polar experts, of artists, to really bring all those perspectives into the declaration and then into the words that we are carrying on.
Well, I think there is a real opportunity here for NGOs and organizations across Asia to engage more actively and become a part of this larger movement. Given your campaign's goals, what have been the most surprising reactions you have encountered from the public, scientists, or policymaker that you didn't expect when you started?
Among scientists, some of the strongest support has come from those who have witnessed change on their eyes firsthand. So they often say the rights language finally matches the scale of what they are feeling. And from policymakers, we have countered both skepticism and curiosity. So some initially see rights of nature as too radical, impractical, but then deeply admit that existing mechanisms are failing to protect even the baselines they care about. So the most hopeful moments are when diplomats and lawyers start brainstorming with us about how to integrate guardianship or duties into the treaty system rather than actually dismissing it outright. There are a lot of supporters of Antarctic rights. I think that the current situation is not really we are seeing that we are failing nature as well, that we cannot continue like this, that we need a mindset shift, that we need to change our relationship with nature and the ecosystems and the wildlife and the rivers and everything. And this is the way to go. So I think, that was the most surprising thing for me.
Many indigenous traditions emphasize reciprocity and responsibility toward the natural world. In what ways have those perspectives influenced the Antarctic Rights Initiative?
Many indigenous traditions emphasize reciprocity, kinship, and responsibilities rather than ownership, and those perspectives have deeply influenced Antarctic rights. We have been listening to indigenous scholars and readers who describe rivers, mountains, ice, ecosystems as relatives or ancestors, not objects, and who see law as a web of relationships rather than a set of permissions. And this has inspired us to think about Antarctica not simply as a protected area, but as a more than human being with whom we have obligations and we have a relation. While Antarctica has no indigenous human population, indigenous philosophies from elsewhere helped us challenge Western assumptions that no permanent populations means no voice. They invited us to consider that the penguins, the whales, the microbial communities, the krill, and even the ice itself are part of a community of beings that law should recognize.
It's really interesting how these perspectives aren't new. They have existed for centuries, isn't it? But are only now entering global conversations in a structured and more impactful way. What are the major battles you are currently fighting behind the scenes that the public may not be aware of?
I think the biggest battle behind the scene is definitely secure, sustained funding. And at the moment, the team is quite small, so we are also doing a lot of work with a very small team. And it's difficult to have a sustained funding and support for an initiative that doesn't really fit neatly into classic conservation or climate silos. And with the current geopolitical situation, even I'm based in Europe, and also some of our allies are in the US or Latin America. Currently, the interest, the focus is not anymore on nature, on sustainability, on the environment. So I think, definitely one of the major battles behind the scene is to convince institutions to invest in something that is a initiative focused on a paradigm shift rather than another short-term project with clear KPIs. This is hard work that rarely appears in public campaign materials. So it's also difficult to measure, I understand. So probably that's the major battle behind the scenes at the moment.
How do you reach people who don't naturally care about environmental issues, especially audiences outside the climate activism bubble?
I think this campaign. So I'm a campaigner, and I've also worked on other campaigns as well. For example, I'm also working on a project on climate misinformation, and I struggle with reaching people outside the climate bubble. Sometimes we really find the same people always at the same events. With Antarctica, I must say it has been different. First of all, the scientific community really engaged strongly with us. We even appeared quite soon into one of the polar journal issues a couple of years ago, 1 year and something ago, that it was only focused on the rights of Antarctica. So the scientific community, people that really love Antarctica, were like the majority of them are on board with Antarctic Rights. I think then with Antarctica also, because it's really connected with a lot of people, we face a barrier at first. They were like a bit skeptical, as I said also before, like I was as well. Just it's just a block of ice at the bottom of the world. But then we use storytelling. We use art, we use visual installation, personal testimonies. So we are really an emotional connection with Antarctica. We show the colors of Antarctica because also we have the idea that Antarctica is white, but actually it's full of colors, is vibrant of life. We have stories from indigenous as well. We have stories from the Maori that are linked to Antarctica, stories from people in Tahiti, in Turtle Island, the current Canada as well, that are linked to Antarctica. So really also challenging this colonial idea that a lot of us had or have about Antarctica, that has been conquered by white man, Shackleton and everyone. No, there are stories. And so we bring empathy. So the key is to frame Antarctica not as a niche environmental issue, so data and everything, but as part of the story of home, identity and fairness and emotions that already matters to the people that are listening. And that's a key, I think. And I must say we've been quite successful as well.
Oh, that's beautiful, Roberta. Looking ahead, what are the next big campaigns or futuristic visions you are working toward?
Looking ahead, this year we're working towards this Antarctica Week that's going to happen end of November, beginning of December this year in Cape Town. We are aiming to have really a lot of rich events all over Cape Town in different fields, in different forums. We're going to go to universities, to galleries, art galleries as well. There will be music, art, education, a big signing event on December 1st, that is Antarctica Day. So that's definitely what we are focusing on. We need the support and endorsement of everyone. So we are exploring long-term visions of Antarctica as rights-bearing commons. So it means what are the governance structures with the guardianship models, the ethical guidelines for research and tourism, and links to the broader movements for rights of nature all over the world. So we need to understand that. Who is going to speak for Antarctica, for example? What are the systems and representation ways that are already in place that we can be inspired and be inspired of and include in the declaration. The second point, so the first is the declaration. The second point is definitely growing the alliance. As I said, we are more than 80 organizations and 300 individuals, but we need to grow. We need to expand to be all over the world, also to be more diverse. So that's definitely the second point. And third is more on the educational side as well. So we want to bring Antarctica everywhere. We want everyone to think about Antarctica, to care about Antarctica, to really feel this connection about Antarctica.
That's pretty impressive. If listeners could take just one meaningful action after hearing this episode, what would you want it to be?
If you could take only one meaningful action, I would ask you to make Antarctica personally relevant in your life and community, and then act from there. That might mean endorsing and sharing the Antarctica Declaration, integrating Antarctica into your teaching, into your music, into your art, pushing your city organization to publicly support rights of nature and rights of Antarctica, or backing the policy that protect nature and recognize the rights of nature and keep fossil fuels in the ground. I think the most powerful shift happens when people stop seeing Antarctica as something out there and start recognizing that the story of Antarctica is the story of our own coastlines, of our own children, our own values. And once we remember the connection with nature, with Antarctica, then once this connection is made, then the political courage becomes much easier, I think.
All right, last question. If Antarctica had a voice and could address humanity right now, what do you think it would ask of us? What is the one truth about Antarctica you wish the world fully grasped? And finally, how can our listeners learn more and become part of this movement?
A lot of people ask me, if Antarctica had a voice and could address humanity right now, what do you think it would ask of us? And you know what? I don't know how to answer to this, because I don't want to speak for Antarctica. I always feel like, again, like we are trying to humanize Antarctica as well. So I don't know what Antarctica would say, but I definitely know what is the well-being of Antarctica. I think I've learned to listen to Antarctica in a different way, and I've learned that language is not only words. I mean, I'm Italian, I should know, because we also use a lot of hand gestures. But joking apart, that's what I learned. So for me, recognizing Antarctica voice doesn't mean that the voice of Antarctica is the same language as I speak. So I don't want to translate the message of Antarctica in something that is my language. But I think that what I learned is definitely to listen to Antarctica and to the language of Antarctica. And Antarctica is already speaking, actually, is suffering. The oceans are warming, there is acidification, we are destroying the balance of the species, we are overfishing krill, the ice is melting, the weather is changing, we are disrupting the global currents, the weather patterns are also changing, and I think that's the message. She's already speaking and she's already addressing humanity. It's just that we are not listening properly and we are not thinking about her well-being as well. I don't know if this was actually the answer that you were waiting for me, but I think sometimes we really try to humanize everything. We always see things from a human perspective, but we must address the fact that not everything can speak in words. There are a lot of languages and a lot of ways of communicating, and we must learn and accept that. Thank you very much for having me today, for sharing the story of Antarctic Rights. I know I shared a lot of things, but it was really a pleasure. And last but not least, the call to action. So to learn more or join this movement, you can explore the work behind the Antarctica Declaration, the IUCN Motion 054, on our website, antarcticrights.org. You can follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn at Antarctic Rights. And you can join the Antarctic Alliance as an individual or organization on our website still. If you want to add a contribution, you can add your voice into the A Voice for Antarctica campaign, always on our website. And feel free also to write to me. My email is antarcticrights@garn.org. Thank you very much for listening to me. And I think also, the call to action that you actually need to have is to bring Antarctica everywhere, but also to start thinking about your role in this system, in this community, and think about yourself as part of a community of life instead of just think about yourself as separate from nature.
Roberta Bosu, thank you. This is the kind of conversation that makes me genuinely proud of what podcasting can be. I'm truly, truly honored. Thank you for being here. You have just heard something that most people on this planet haven't heard yet. You now know what Antarctic Rights is. You know what's at stake. You know what the declaration proposes, and you know exactly where to go to do something about it. antarcticrights.org. The link is in the show notes. Go there, sign. Share this episode with one person who needs to hear it. One person, that's all. This is Mitali Ohri, your show host, standing with Antarctica and signing off. Take care of each other and take care of this planet. It's the only one we have. Thank you so much.